All right. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, everybody from all over the world. Very happy to be here again for this 8th meeting. Very happy also to share with you that over the past year, we managed to have over 700 participants, which I think it's very relevant and it gives a good understanding of the sector, especially because these 700 people joined us from 95 different countries. Very happy to see old friends and new friends here registered, and also a special welcome to the class of Professor Orsini. We have about 70 people connected directly through Professor Orsini from Bologna. With no further delay, let me welcome the panelists, and as usual, let me give the floor to Iride Ceccacci, Associate Director and Head of Advisory of Agribusiness in EBRD. Iride, the floor is yours to welcome the crowd. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacopo. Thank you, everybody, to follow us in this journey. As Jacopo said, this is our 8th session, and for me, one of the most interesting one. So we looked at urban farming and opportunities from many points of view. This is a project that is sponsored by the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development together with the Investment Center of the FAO. And now, finally, we reached out the day in which we can transform all that knowledge in potential investment and opportunities. When we engage in such project, this is the angle that we really want to tackle, and I'm really humbled by many of you and the expertise that we have in the room. So thank you very much for being here. Please be open, ask questions, and let's start. So I leave the floor to our panelists. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you very much, Iride. Thank you very much. And again, thank you, everybody, for joining. We have 3 very important panelists today that will give us a brief, let's say, presentation and message, 5 minutes each, I promise. And then we will have the usual discussion. Again, as Iride asked, please don't be shy. Feel free to use the chat to ask your questions or to raise your hand. The command to raise your hand is under the reaction on the lower right corner of your screen. Now, let me introduce you first the panelists, which are Professor Matteo Vittuari, agricultural economist from the University of Bologna. We have Lambert von Oren, I hope I spelled properly your family name, senior specialist in fresh produce at Rabobank. And we have Andrius Matsoukinas, sorry, Andrew, Associate Director Agribusiness at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. As Iride pre-announced, very hot topic for commercial urban farming, mostly very hot topic in these days about high-tech farming in urban and peri-urban environment. You have seen in the agenda a number of points that we will discuss with panelists. Let me start by giving the floor to Professor Vittuari. Matteo, please, the floor is yours. Again, colleagues, feel free to use the chat or to raise the hand for questions. Over to you.
So thank you, Jacopo, and thanks for the invitation, and good afternoon and good morning to everybody. So I'm, as Jacopo was anticipating, I'm from the University of Bologna, Department of Agricultural and Food Sciences. And as an economist, I'm dealing with food system sustainability on one side, so looking at the sustainability of investments and operations, both from a financial point of view, but also including social and environmental impacts. And on the other side, I'm trying to understand the decision-making process of consumers in different type of situations. So within the last few years, we did work quite a lot with, let's say, urban farming activities, and also together with Francesco Orsini, that was mentioned at the beginning of this call, and his group also on vertical farming systems, with the aim to look at the sustainability of vertical farming systems. And we had the chance to support a number of entrepreneurs that were engaged in trying to understand how to better organize the system and how to be financed in order to put the system or their project ideas into operation. And as an investment, also vertical farming systems as challenges and also opportunities. So looking from a financial point of view, what we have seen with the projects that we have supported, about the 60% of the operational cost are related to energy. So this is quite a challenge, especially in this period when the cost of energy is particularly high. Then we have that about the 80% of the capex, so of the capital expenditures, are coming from climatic and cultivation systems. We can say that in the type of systems that we have overlooked, the OPEX per year was about 2.8 million euro, and the break-even point was reached at 2.3 million bags. The total production was about 3,000 tons of baby leaf lettuce per year, with the productivity that is about 4% compared to conventional greenhouses. The price was that we foreseen was about 1.5 euro for a bag of 80 grams of a vertical farming baby leaf lettuce. This was clearly targeted to the Italian market, with the idea to keep it, let's say, lower compared to the price that sometimes is characterizing the market. And this is allowing generally within the type of systems that we have analyzed a profit of 800,000 euro per year, with a benefit cost ratio of 1.2. So this is a bit of a picture in terms of financial elements that should be considered. But if we are looking only the financial elements, we are, let's say, missing part of the story, and we are missing part of the elements that are characterizing a vertical farming system. So as I mentioned, the productivity is much higher than, let's say, conventional than conventional greenhouses. But at the same time, we are also providing benefits in terms of reduction of land use, food security, and valorization of brownfields. So it is not enough to look at financial sustainability, but in this type of investment, we need to look at also other benefits, looking at environmental and social benefits in particular. It is true that the cost in terms of energy is very high, but we can work on the improvement in shelf life and in terms of better nutritional and organoleptic quality that would release additional benefits, also in terms of consumer perception and potentially health. So there is a higher price for energy cost, but there are also other benefits that should be considered. The same is in terms of potential in terms of better managing plant growth and save additional water through transpiration recovery, and this can be done through climate control. And also we should consider that we can optimize water and nutrients, and we can save the 95% in terms of water usage. So the value that we can identify and we can share with the products that are coming from vertical farming are quite many, and this should be measured and communicated both in terms of production, but especially looking at consumers that should be made aware about the values that we are considering by producing within a vertical farming system. So in terms of understanding and measuring, there are factors that might be perceived as positive by consumer. For example, if we consider lower carbon footprint or higher yields, and eventually if this is bringing lower prices. If higher yields can bring lower prices compared to the usual price of products coming from vertical farming. At the same time, there are also elements that might be perceived as negative from consumers. For instance, if there is an excess of automatization within a vertical farming system, or if the higher use of energy is considered unsustainable, or if there is any concern in terms of health risk. Then there is an issue over the design of vertical farming system. So if we consider that sustainability should be considered not only in financial terms, but also in social and environmental terms, so considering environmental and social impacts, we should use an approach to the development of business models that is considering the three layers. So looking at environmental, social, and the economic layers in terms of elements that are characterizing the business model. And then a very important issue, if we look at consumers, are the strategies that we want to tackle in order to engage consumers with vertical farming in terms of price transparency or new values that we can communicate to consumers, and how we can communicate these values to consumer through EPD certifications or engaging packaging. But we really need to engage consumers in understanding what are the products that are coming from vertical farming systems, where they can find these products, how they can recognize this product, and why they should pay a higher price in order to get benefits that can be released by products coming from vertical farming systems in terms of social benefits, health benefits, and environmental benefits. So looking at the entire and at all the dimensions of sustainability. And thanks to everybody for the attention.
Thank you very much, Matteo. Thank you very much. Very important to consider ESG among the different and various variables when making investments and taking decision concerning commercial urban farming. Matteo showed a very specific aspect of commercial urban farming, which is those that use vertical farming, which is the apex of the technology right now. But let's remember that there are different approaches and technologies to technology and to production. Now, let me give the floor to Lombard to understand more what kind of information, where are we now, and a number of other elements from a very big and relevant bank perspective. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Jacopo, and thanks everyone for attending this interesting dialogue. First of all, maybe explain what Rabobank is. Rabobank is a cooperative bank from Dutch origin, and we finance approximately 80% of Dutch greenhouses, and also we finance some greenhouses in the United States and in Australia. And so we get a lot of requests from all kind of companies, all kind of consultancy agencies, etc., about what's the current perspective of, let's say, high-tech horticulture and the different modalities, and that could be a high-tech greenhouse, that could be a rooftop farming, that could be vertical farming, urban farming, or whatever. I have one slide for this, let's say, kickoff of 5 minutes, and I will share it with you. So I hope everybody is able to see this slide. And what we see in a lot of pitches from investors or from the people who, let's say, make the initiative to grow fresh produce in a new way, in a high-tech way, is that they trying to say, well, my core business is solving the world food problem, and well, I would say just focus on supplying fresh produce. Solving the world food problem is, I think, something you have to do with wheat or rice or other arable crops, but not with fresh produce. Fresh produce is, of course, something you need in your diet, in your daily diet. And it's also good for, let's say, the protein transition we need in this world. But let's just stay on the ground and say supplying fresh produce is my first thing I want to deliver. And the second thing, a lot of all new initiatives are trying to develop intellectual property. And maybe they have an idea that a lot of things they are developing are new, but vertical stacked systems are already there at least for 60 years in a couple of crops. So it is more the daylight-free cultivation what's new, and daylight-free cultivation is in fact not really daylight-free, it's indirect daylight, because you collect the daylight in your solar panel and then transform it into, let's say, LED lights and have a kind of indirect daylight. So it is this intellectual property focus of a lot of those startups and scale-ups. I would say what you should do or what you could do is providing new technology to inform everyone about new ways of fructification and germination during the process of producing leafy greens, tomatoes, strawberries, or whatever. The second thing we occur when we talk to people with new plans or with already developed plans is that a lot of people around the world are reinventing the wheel. And we should, I think, more co-create, more cooperate in this new field, because when we sometimes, the first thing people say to us, well, you need to subscribe an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. And then after this, I see a lot of things I saw already in other companies. So I think there's a lot of money spoiled by reinventing the wheel everywhere in the world. So what do you want to hide is my question to a lot of investors or a lot of scale-up and startup businessmen. I would say transparency gives you a trust by your banker, by your investor, or by a consumer or supermarket. And the third thing I want to, let's say, discuss and lay on the table here in this discussion, in this dialogue, is that it seems that who is benefiting from vertical farming or from, let's say, daylight-free cultivation or new high-tech horticultural systems are the early investors who are really trying to, let's say, benefit from the hype we had the last 2 years, 3 years maybe, and maybe some supermarkets who are trying to, let's say, greenwash their marketing agencies are, let's say, greenwashing their real business. And in my view, end consumers or the environment should in the end benefit from new high-tech horticulture. And a couple of things I want to also add to this discussion is that a lot of people don't know really the difference between banking and investing. And it's not the same, because when you're looking at a bank and you try to get money from a bank, well, it's quite simple. A bank gives you a loan and wants the money back so you need cash flow for your repayments. If you're an investor, then it's more about value creation and you keep your money in the company itself, maybe for a short term, but hopefully investors have also the idea of putting the money for quite a long time in this new, let's say, new high-tech horticulture. So it's about value creation. So that's really something different. The money is not the same. And like also Professor Vitwari already said, we need to look at the energy consumption in, let's say, the high-tech horticulture. We need to be climate neutral in 2040. That's in the Netherlands. That's the idea. That's let's say advocacy organizations are focusing on that. And also supermarkets and other supply chain companies are looking at their scope 3 emissions. So you really should look at a kind of LCA in all elements of, let's say, your sustainability score. And of course, carbon dioxide is one of them. So my conclusion for now is that there are various business models in which the economies of super high-tech horticulture could work in research, in very isolated areas, in let's say a kind of hybrid systems where you take part of your growth between germination and fructification in a vertical stack system, and later on you might need a greenhouse. But however, for a sustainable business model, entrepreneurs and businesses should be more transparent. They should co-create with stakeholders, building trust, and be more end market oriented. That's what I want to start off the discussion, Jacopo, but maybe first to Andreas.
Thank you very much, Lambert. I think this is very important. I see a number of big points that you mentioned, but let me stress on one, because it's 8 e-dialogues that we are stressing about the concreteness of the messages that are transmitted and the transparency of what these companies are really doing and how they're doing is not always very clear. And let me add, sometimes we have these difficulties in understanding if the product is the technology or the agricultural crop itself. So I think this is an excellent point that I hope will also allow us to engage more deeply into the discussion. Now, let me give the floor to Andrews for the E-dialogue perspective. Andrews, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jacopo. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I will start with a short introduction. I'm an associate director in the agribusiness team at EBRD. For people who do not know us, EBRD is a development bank investing in 38 countries, starting from Baltic countries, Central and Eastern Europe, Balkans, Turkey, Central Asia, and Northern Africa. We invest around 10 billion euros each year. We provide debt financing, we invest in equity, bonds, mezzanine capital. We can invest across full balance sheet of our investee companies. In the agribusiness team, which I'm part of, we invest throughout the entire food value chain, starting from primary agriculture, commodity trading, food processing, and all the way to food retail chains. We are a team of 45 bankers. We invest across 60 projects each year with around 800 million euros in volume. So on vertical farming, I think we quite like the sector. For a sustainability-driven bank like EBRD, the sector can address a number of industry challenges. For example, let's take water, and my colleagues, panelists mentioned this topic already, but we all know the fact agriculture uses 70% of fresh water. I was talking to this vertical farming startup, and I was actually really surprised to find out that an innocent product like lettuce uses 250 liters of water to grow 1 kilogram of lettuce in open agriculture. And in vertical farming, you only need 1 liter of water to grow 1 kilogram of lettuce. So vertical farming can significantly reduce water use, and that's quite important in some of the water-stressed regions where we invest. Vertical farming doesn't use land, is not exposed to climate risks. Vertical farming also can significantly shorten the supply chain. I was discussing earlier with my colleagues in the bank, and we were actually quite shocked to find out that an average food travels 2,400 kilometers to consumers. And for fresh produce, that's probably even more than that. and vertical farms can significantly shorten that because they're based in urban areas. And by being based in urban areas, they can significantly reduce the food waste. We know 1/3 of our food is wasted globally, and a feedback I had from some of the vertical farms that they can significantly reduce that by extending the shelf life of their products. So from all these perspectives, we like vertical farming. EBRD is an impact investor, but we also a commercially minded bank. When we invest, we want to see financially viable businesses. Vertical farming, activity of vertical farming has been mainly centered, around economically developed countries, so Europe, US, UK, Japan. We are seeing some vertical farming activity in our countries. Some of them are quite small, early stage, so really difficult for institutional investors like us to finance. Some are looking or planning to develop commercial scale farms, but yet in quite early stage of development. So throughout this study with FAO on urban farming, we hope to identify some promising companies in our region, and we keen to engage to see how we can play a part in this sector. To date, we have not yet financed a vertical farm, but we are active. We monitor the developments quite closely. Thank you, Jacopo. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrews. Thank you very much, and very interesting to hear from, your position and the position of EBRD. Now, there are a number of elements that arise from our three panelists, and I think Eva just posted a very key kind of follow-up question for the three of you, and of course for the audience. Again, feel free to use the chat or to raise your hand electronically, and we will give you the floor. Now, let me read Eva's question. Are commercial urban farms in non-conducive macroeconomic context, where, for instance, renewable energy is not produced or readily available, ready for investment? In another word, which are the main elements that makes an investment ready for banks and for the banks, for example? Over to you. Who wants to start? Let me decide. Lombard, I will start with you, please.
Yeah. My first question to Eva would be, is there a market for your produce? And like also Professor Vituari said, he is, I think he's focusing on a kind of niche market with a good price. But what if you get the normal price? And sometimes also in investments, and I have a long experience in greenhouse horticulture, and usually in the Netherlands we compare this, new daylight-free cultivation with greenhouses, not with outdoor farming. It's also what's your, alternative. And so my first question would always be, what's your market? Are you producing for a niche market, for food service, for retailers, for the average consumer with a normal disposable income? Is it a high income country? Is it a low income country? That would be my first question.
All right, before going to the follow-up question from Eva, Andrews, what's your position? What would be your answer to this question?
A good question. So for vertical, I mentioned earlier that we look when we invest for businesses to have commercial viability, financially viable business. So I think you need to really balance several things. So one is price, Mr. Lambert mentioned it already, and are you competitive enough with other alternatives in the market, and what is your positioning out there? And we invest as a bank in emerging markets, so some producers who market as a premium in developed countries, maybe there is a niche or market to buy it, but in emerging markets, purchasing power is much lower. So we have to consider that fact. The second is distribution. So what is your access to market? Do you have retailers who are ready to take it from you, and a stable market out there? And a third is obviously energy costs. So when you design and plan to your business plan, you have to take into account that this will be a significant cost, and how can you mitigate that risk in calculating all that. So if you balance all those three things well, we have seen some companies are able to make it profitable, but you really need to think about I would say these three critical things in making an investable case.
Matteo, what's your view on
maybe, well, yeah, for sure the energy cost is a critical issue. I'll try to make a wider consideration. So, and I do not have an answer for the consideration I'm going to make, but it is something that as a researcher, I would probably consider to investigate. So even in conventional farming systems, today there is a problem in internalizing externalities. So the price that we are paying for the food we consume is not necessarily internalizing environmental and social externalities. So the price that we are generally paying is usually lower than the real value of the food, because sometimes we pollute more and we consume, let's say, social benefits in not considering the conditions of the workers or so on. The perception I have by working with vertical farming systems, it is we are a way better in internalizing externalities in the final price that we are calculating. So we are more, let's say, precise in internalizing the emissions, the cost of energy, the social cost compared to other type of farming systems. So there is a sort of not unfair competition, but the way we calculate the final price in conventional farming is not as precise as the one that we are, as the type of, let's say, approach or calculation that we are making for vertical farming systems. So I have not an answer, but I would be happy to make research or to consider this issue, because I think it might be relevant.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Matteo. Before giving the floor to Himanshu, that I'm very happy he's joining us, if I'm not mistaken, from India. But let me just highlight like two points. That there is definitely, and I see also a couple of questions. One follow-up question from Eva and one question from Bologna. About this issue about what needs to be communicated for investors, bankers, depending on the maturity of the sector to invest. And maybe after I give the floor to Himanshu, we can also go back to that and be probably more specific in what do you want to see. I mean, if I'm coming to you with fantastic projects and things, would you give me money without my books, for example, and if I have the books, what do you want to see in these books? And what do you want to see in terms of ESG? Because EBRD is now becoming more and more the climate bank and more the environment bank. And we want to understand how much this is effectively valued then in investment consideration. Himanshu, floor is yours, please.
Yep. Hello, everybody, and thank you, Jacopo, for giving the floor to me. So I am a vertical farmer, just to give you some context, and we have been doing vertical farming in India since last 4 years. So I have a lot of questions because primarily I am dealing with all the struggle with respect to raising funds for vertical farming in India. The first question, and I'll summarize all these questions in the chat box. The first question is where the tech is. Like a lot of investors, a lot of banks we have been talking to, they say, you guys are using lights, you guys are using HVAC systems, but what actually is the tech? Our friend Mr. Lambert did give some insights about what tech could actually be with respect to supply chain management, with respect to analyzing consumer demand, so on and so forth. But that is actually not helping us get the right multiplier with respect to a startup or a grown-up company to raise some more equity or more to raise some more funds, because the tech is already there. We are growing food without using soil. We are growing food all around the year. That is tech in itself. This is coming from a farmer. The second issue is whether we should go with VC fund or we should go with development finance, because we are looking at a long-term outlook. We are looking at sustainability criteria, and they're not going to give us fruits. They're not going to give us returns in short term. So whether we should go with VC money or we should go with development finance, that is my second dilemma or second challenge, I would say. And third and last, I would like to ask if there are any investors or VCs who are actively investing in Middle East or India for that region.
Thank you very much. Lambert, Andrews, Matteo, who wants to start? I think it's a number of questions, Andrew. He might have more than one, but I think each deserves at least a partial answer or a global answer, as you want. Lambert, please.
Yeah. I'll start giving you an answer, but it's not a fully answer and maybe not a satisfying answer, because first of all, like I said, the financing or banking is something else than investing. So before you have your cash flow and the business model is really working, you really should look at venture capital or let's say equity before you can go to a bank, because a bank wants a repayment within short notice. There could be some grace period with a bank loan, but we have, of course, our institutions like the European Central Bank, etc., who doesn't allow us to mix, let's say, bank financing with investing. So that's maybe the first thing. The tech thing you brought on the table. My idea or my advice or my thoughts would be, you should look at the tech you need in a certain environment. Like I already mentioned, the hybrid systems. So do you really need very high tech in your market? And I don't know where your startup is it in Delhi or in Mumbai or in Bangalore, but it could be that low tech is enough for the specific market you want to serve. So are you really serving retailers or people with low disposable income? Don't go to very high tech systems, because, well, the price of Dutch tomatoes is usually higher than the price of Spanish tomatoes. And like Matteo Vittuari already said, it has of course also to do with the internalities. Are you really pricing all the sustainable effects? But that would be the second thing. And the third question, you had a third question, but I forgot it, I think. But maybe you could repeat it, Himanshu.
Yeah, so my third question was, any investors actively investing in India or Middle East?
Yeah, we are not.
Okay.
Andrew?
Pretty much echoing what Lambert said, raising debt financing, you need to demonstrate some cash flow there in your existing business. So that really depends on the development stage on a business. And if you just starting your business in a way, scaling up, so for that you need equity, and whether it's venture capital, we have seen some companies teaming up with retailers and getting financing from there. So you need to find equity before you're able to attract other type of capital to demonstrate, that unit of economics work. You're able to produce competitively priced product. And on your question on VC funds, sorry, we don't invest in that part of the world, so I cannot comment much. And obviously, depends where you're positioning yourself with respect to, you said tech is already there, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel, which is great. So you don't need to spend a lot of money on R&D, and so that shortens your route to the market. So in my view, all you need, just to present a credible case to your investors and try to get an equity investment into your business before you're able to attract other type of financing.
Thank you, Andreas. Matteo?
Well, I can only echoing what the previous speakers were saying, and maybe emphasizing the need that, well, we have to consider the type of business model we want to develop, and we want to consider to have the right mix between technology, potential social benefits, and the environmental benefits. For instance, by engaging, let's say, different typologies of workers, and so considering the type of, let's say, capacity or type of workers that we want to engage in combination with the type of technology that is more appropriate for the context and for the workers. This is also important.
Great, thank you very much, Matteo. Another additional layer of complexity I see. It's quite interesting. Let me give the floor to Noel, who has posted a couple of questions, and I think it would be best if he goes directly on the floor and asks them to the panelists or to whoever. And please, I see from the list that we have other representatives of banks, venture capitalists, investment funds. Please feel free to take the floor to raise questions or to answer the questions from the funds yourself. Please, Noel.
Thank you, Jacopo. I guess I'll first of all, I'm with a firm in the US called Equilibrium Capital, and we make private equity style investments in controlled environments, foods, among other things. And if you look for us, you'll find that we've actually only made commitments to horizontal or glass houses investing, Lambert, in North America. We unashamedly borrow a lot of Dutch technology and know-how and investment acumen. But I was reflecting on the question from Himanshu, and the way I would approach it is actually in connecting this to what Matteo and Lambert and Andres said. To me and to us, it's a question of solving backwards. What's the market you're trying to address? Really, what do consumers want? Because there's a big difference, for example, in consumer in Singapore versus consumer in Chicago versus consumer in, Himanshu, you raised the point, in Abu Dhabi, in terms of what they can afford and what do they want to eat. Now, number one, right? Because, and if you go to a place like Singapore where you can buy bok choy, leafy green, grown outdoors in Malaysia, trucked over, that's what you're competing with. Now, if you say, no, I'm actually going to go for the top shelf stuff in Singapore, that's quite different, because the top shelf consumers don't buy bok choy grown in Malaysia. They will buy greenhouse produce grown in Genting Highland. Unit price, a lot more. So that's point one. Solve backwards. Point two, because it is vegetable, this is something we say in-house at Equilibrium. At the end of the day, we're talking about vegetables. And that's what people want to eat. So as a business matter, in order to be affordable and competitive, what you really have to solve for is unit cost per kilo, per gram, whatever you. So Matteo talked about 1.35 euros for 80-gram baby leaf, right? Is that competitive for that market? And it really comes down to the unit cost. Is that to make the business sustainable, the grower, the VF, the 1.8 a 1.35 per 80 grams package, is that with decent margin for the business? Otherwise, the business won't survive. Or to Andre's point, can't make loan payments, right? Doesn't have enough sustainable cash flow. So second point is unit cost, which then leads to the third point. This is really Himanshu's question. So what type of capital is suitable, right? For your business in India versus for somebody trying to build a greenhouse. And there are examples of greenhouses being built in Saudi Arabia, in UAE, in Qatar, and so on. And you know, it addresses those demands of the market. What are people able to pay, and what can people afford? And I'll leave you with this thought, which is really a little bit of connecting to Matteo's point. Matteo, you talk about appropriately costing the vegetable to reflect the other things that we don't cost vegetables, like climate, like water. To me and to us, it's a question of horizon, how long you measure, right? Because if you're a farmer and you're trying to make every year loan payment and have enough to eat, your horizon is an interesting juxtaposition for a farmer. They have annual bills they have to pay. That's an annual horizon. And they have land they want to preserve. That's a forever horizon. And they're trying to live in that stretch. And it is not easy, because at the end of the day, the pressures of today is somewhat more pronounced than the pressure of forever. So, and can a farmer afford to think about environment, about their community? They do, they're aware. And I would say that it's a challenge because they are aware, but they have bills to pay every year. Point is, going back to my earlier example of description of the 1.35 euros per 80 grams, is that enough margin for the farmer, whether it's vertical or horizontal glass houses, to make a living? As simple as that. So those are the equations that you were trying to solve for. And the nature of capital, the type of capital, has to be suitable for the solution you're coming up with. Jacobo?
Thank you very much, Noel. Again, everybody feel free to take the floor. But Lambert, Andrews, Matteo, any follow-up point about what Noel just said, which I...
No, it is well, first of all, thanks for the additional thoughts. It's I think it is an emerging challenge or an emerging issue to better understand how to price products in general. And at the end of the story, and within any production system, even environmental cost and social cost need to be paid. They don't need to be paid by farmers, but they are paid either by farmers, the society. So the point is, if I have farmers that are taking advantage of solutions that are potentially more expensive in order to reduce environmental cost, or that are taking, let's say, different type of contracts in order to better to provide benefits to workers and eventually to consumers by providing products that are better nutritional, that have better nutritional characteristics. This is something that is potentially important. You were considering, you started your speech by saying, well, a consumer in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, New York, or Rome is potentially looking for different things. So that should be considered, and also the conditions where farmers are operating should be considered. I would not say that farmers should pay the cost, but we should consider how to better leverage the cost over the society, so that the farmers are not paying the entire cost. And I do agree that farmers need to look at the bills year by year, but we have an overall cost that we have to consider for the environment and for society. So we really need, in my point of view, to understand how to better price sustainability. So we need to measure sustainability, because until today we have often discussed or considered sustainability as a very theoretical concept. Why we need indicators and ways to better measure sustainability and to allocate responsibilities over the food supply chain, including consumers and government.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Matteo. Anybody else? Otherwise, I give the floor to Iride Ceccaci. Iride, please.
I actually wanted to ask a question to Matteo because he also in his presentation raised a lot the demand side, right, of this business. And for me, so far, this has been mainly a supply story. So especially in emerging markets, of course, I mean, you mentioned whatever, Tokyo, Rome, US, and this is different. But how much this can become quickly a story in which these crops are recognized, are sustainable or socially more viable. And sometimes what happens is that, you know, with income growth, maybe in emerging markets, people shift from one crop to another. But I don't see this field of leaf greens being one where the consumer is very attached motivationally, like it could be a dairy product in which you're shifting from one protein to another. So I wanted to ask Matteo if he has a view on how this would change if we looked at data on demand from consumers in different parts of the world, and whether this requires really a typology of consumer which is so sophisticated that, you know, can only be seen in these economies that are very much developed, while opportunities might be in other places, like our friend Imanshu was telling us, right? So for me, this could be interesting to understand. And maybe I pass the floor to Matteo, but any other person that have studied this might jump in and actually help us sort this. Thank you, Matteo.
Thank you, Iride. And well, I do agree that so far it has been merely a supply side story, no? And we try to add some consideration over consumers, but there is a lack of information or a lack of understanding and research on the consumer side. Also because the numbers are still limited, and so it is fairly difficult to let's say, to predict what might happen. I think that in general, the communication is important because consumers are clearly not informed about the values of products coming from vertical farming systems. You mentioned opportunities, so I'll try to reply basing on a framework that we are using in order to try to evaluate the decision-making process of consumers, going beyond the, let's say, monetary element of the decision-making process. We are using a framework which is called motivation, opportunities, and abilities. So we are looking at the motivation why a consumer is looking for something. So maybe because I have an environmental concern. The ability, so my capacity, my skills in terms of how to transform a product. In this case, it is not so relevant because we are talking about products that are not innovative per se. The innovation is in the way the products are produced. And then we have the other element that is opportunities. Opportunity is simply where I can buy something. So at the moment, it is probably difficult to understand where I can buy, where I can find this product. So if I'm asking a consumer about a product coming from vertical farming, they probably have not enough information about this product. So in terms of motivation, they lack the motivation about, I want to buy these products because they can deliver benefits in environmental terms. So there is less use of water, or in health terms, because they can provide more nutrients, or because in terms of quality, they offer better organoleptic characteristics. Then the other question, I'm not informed about the values, but I'm also not informed about where I can get these products and how I can recognize these products on a shelf of a supermarket if I can find this product there. So I can imagine my answer is not satisfactory, but it is probably a starting point.
Lambert?
Yeah, maybe I could add something. We did some research in the Netherlands about, let's say, the possibility to ask for a higher price for vertical farm products, for leafy greens and salads, and that was approximately 20% compared to greenhouse products. But one of the things you should also consider is that in the European Union, for instance, hydroponics are not organic. And for instance, in the US, you can sell hydroponics as an organic product. And usually this price difference of 20-25%, you see a lot in, let's say, consumer research and market research between organic farm products and non-organic. So there are consumers willing, a part of the consumers are willing to pay this, let's say, true pricing maybe. I don't know if it's a really true price for all the external effects, but yeah, so also sometimes legislation is different between different parts of the world.
Thank you very much, Lambert. I think Iride,
Jacopo,
please.
Can I just add one
Please,
more
go
thing?
ahead.
So on the demand, it's a very good question, Iride, you asked. So on the demand point, you know, if I'm not mistaken, the market for, you know, leafy greens and salads globally is 70 billion. So, you know, there is a market out there. It's just a target market that you're targeting the product. I think that determines. So if you going as a premium product to consumer conscious economies, you know, then, you know, the market is probably much smaller than that. But if you're able to reach price parity to other products, then, you know, there is a huge market out there for you to go and sell it.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, colleagues. Before I give the floor to Stuart, that made an interesting comment in the chat. Let me also raise a point here. What if, okay, now so far we have looked at these products as we would look at the normal commodities, at how salads are and how salads are, but according, and I'm not referring here to the FAO position or to the study position or of course EBRD or anybody else, but it seems from the communications and the messages and the studies that we're seeing around, and we are studying this since almost a year and a half now, that basically we are selling the same product that is a different product because it has different values and different properties attached. And not all these properties are, let's say, financial properties in the sense that, okay, they may or may not be environmental, they may or again may not be social. So I think here we are a bit in an analytic situation where we want to go carbon neutral. We want to feed 8 billion people, but we want them to eat vegetables and other green leaves products. So I think we are kind of either putting the hooks in front of the chart, or as we say in Italy, making, you know, not talking to the I mean, making comments before having seen the bill. So we really need to find somewhere a direction. And I was wondering how financial institutions can also kind of, if not lead the way, but at least make clear what is to be done and what is not to be done. But before answering to me, because I know it's my usual very complex and philosophical question, let me give the floor to Stuart, that makes a comment, and I would like this comment to be heard by everybody so that we can enrich the discussion. Stuart, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. So our team deploys vertical farms, particularly in emerging markets. Right now, I'm based in Beijing, and a lot of our deployments are focused in China, quite large scale. And really our goal is we are a technology provider instead of a fresh produce provider. So our business model is to develop technology and sell technology rather than sell branded fresh produce at a high-end supermarket. And so we, in order for our company to be successful, our customers need to be able to sell their fresh produce or whatever they're growing profitably. And so for us, it's very simple. If our unit economics aren't comparable to some of the glass greenhouses, the higher tech greenhouses, or to imports or organics, then our technology doesn't provide them with the return that they're looking for. And so, we've spent the last 9 years really kind of drilling down on unit economics, both from a capital efficiency perspective. So what is the initial capital expenditure that's required relative to the annual production capacity? And then the obvious one is the OpEx per kg. So, how much does it cost to produce, a head of lettuce or, a pot of flowers or, a batch of tomatoes. And so, China is a very unforgiving market. Vegetable prices here are incredibly cheap. And so we have to find niche markets, but niche markets in China are still humongous in size. And so, we've really focused on these niche markets at the beginning to kind of build the scale. And also as our technology is improving, we're starting to be able to produce more commoditized, leafy greens and herbs and fresh produce. But, kind of having a very, at the end of the day, a consumer isn't going to say, I'm willing to pay double because yours is grown in a safer environment without using pesticides. Like, they will never make that decision. At most, we've seen customers pay up to 15% more for a product that is demonstrated to be better. And that is literally the maximum threshold we've ever seen. And so for us, it really is, how do we drill down on the unit economics? And so kind of developing a lot of the core technology in-house, the LEDs, the automation, the monitoring. I think a lot of people say don't reinvent the wheel, but as we were looking at scaling, kind of what was available in the market didn't serve the needs of our customers in emerging markets well. So in a developed market, I think this would have made a lot of sense, but in the emerging market context, it didn't make sense. It was too expensive. It was impossible to scale. And also kind of the way in which these farms are operated are also different. The person in America that's driving a tractor might be the owner, the manager, and the operator all in one person. But in emerging market countries, a lot of times the owner of the farm will never step foot on the property. A farm manager will always be behind a computer in an air-conditioned room, and then the operator will be in the field. And so to be able to build software that is dedicated to these different user profiles, to be able to do a lot of these things and localize it for the context of these emerging markets, was our huge challenge, which is why kind of it took us so long to develop the technology. And the reason why we were able to survive this long, and maybe going back to what Himanshu asked, is, our backers have been family offices. They want to see a better world for their grandkids. Having said that, they need a return. So it's not like they're providing charity money either. And so if we are unable to demonstrate that we have the capacity, the capabilities to scale our technology, it doesn't really matter like how excited they might be about what we might be able to accomplish. Like, we have to be able to demonstrate that. And so because the VC market and even kind of the commercial banking market in emerging markets is not as kind of sophisticated as some of the kind of Western geographies, we've relied on a very specific type of investors and a very specific type of financial leasing partners so that we can get the debt financing for our customers' projects and we can get the equity finance for our company to continue to grow.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Stuart. Lambert, I think you wanted to say something before then I gave the floor to Stuart instead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, happy to hear from Stuart that he looks at, let's say, the fresh produce his customer needs to sell at the market, because a lot of technology providers in this space, in this, let's say, high-tech horticulture, usually have more kind of push, let's say push marketing, sell my equipment and then say hello. So Stuart, I really like that in your comments. And I think one of the issues in, let's say, getting lower costs per unity is this economies of scale. How do we reach that in let's say, high-tech systems? Because of a lot of systems start with 80 square meters or 150 square meters or whatever per unit. But and we see a lot of systems around the world, maybe 150 or 200 or 300 or whatever. And when you look at, for instance, high-tech greenhouses, the Venlo greenhouse is, yeah, let's say the common standard worldwide, and there are some variations, of course, but still, you should look for reaching economies of scale in this urban farming. I think we need some standardization.
Andrews, Matteo, any additional comment on that specific discussion? All right. So let me, I think, like, you know, Lombard and Stuart, thank you again. Many thanks for your time. When we talk about, you know, going at scale and standardization, I think, like, from what we have seen so far, it's kind of going a bit in a different direction from what the companies are doing. I mean, in our from our perspective and from what we heard in general, what we hear in general, and the e-dialogue we ran in Dortmund, I think was quite clear, is if everything is secret and everything cannot be disclosed and nobody talks about anything, it's impossible basically to benchmark, to scale up. Now, I know I do understand that there is a lot of patterns and there is a lot, but let's not forget the IT lesson, and let's be more open, and this, I think, will clear up the floor for those that are really ready to sell something in the market, and will make the money side of the coin more comfortable. But like, I see that there is a question from Daniele Socci. Please, Daniele.
Hi, everybody. Yes, just a question from my side. I'm quite new of this team about vertical farming. Just wondering if you already explore another way to try to boost this revolution of vertical farm, to spread this phenomenon. So my question is, did you explore to, especially in development markets, to involve, for example, big chefs, important chefs, just to try to let vertical farm become some of fashion trend? Because okay, we know that I understand that it's especially just to try to find a new way to produce in a better way, but we have to face, as you mentioned before, lots of limits in terms of energy, space, cultural, I think legal perspective, because as you mentioned before, each country has different rules and so on. And just to try to think out of the box, did you see an interest from a marketing point of view, from a fashion point of view, from as I mentioned before, chefs and these big names that can become testimonial of the potential of this vertical farm phenomenon?
Thank you very much, Daniele. Daniele, can you just briefly tell us who you represent, so that the audience knows how to place?
Okay. No, I just represent myself in this case, but in any case, I'm working for an asset manager company, an international asset manager company. So we are on a sales side, but we used to talk about funds and investment aspects of also of agribusiness area.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think Himanshu has either an answer to you or an additional question for the panel. Please.
No, I would like to provide some comments on what he said, and that also aligns with what Stuart said a couple of minutes ago. So we, as a company, as a vertical farming company in India, we work with a lot of chefs. Of lately, we invited well-renowned chefs to our farm, and what we saw was they were ready to buy our produce, which was 7 times the price that they were currently paying for. So there was no 15% or 20% premium that they were ready to pay for. They were even ready to pay 7 times, and I can show you bills for that. But what has actually happened is their net consumption has actually reduced. because what they now realize is a lot of the food was already getting wasted. Since now what they're buying from is coming from a vertical farm near their kitchen, the order value, the quantity has reduced, the wastages has reduced, and the net impact on their monthly expenditure has actually fallen, even after buying a produce at super expensive price. After that, we have now partnered with a hospitality management institute and are training more than 500 chefs every year about how the food is actually grown, how they should value the produce, and how they can identify which produce is right, which produce they can actually get from local markets, and they don't have to rely on imported stuff. So for us as a company, we are actually doing it, and we really find huge benefits and huge potential in doing such activities, not even from a marketing perspective, but from a sales angle also.
Thank you, Himanshu,
Thank you
for your feedback. Thank you.
I think we also have examples in Italy and all over Europe of partnership with chefs and multiple stars, restaurants, and I think it's definitely good for marketing and for making the product known. But we need to make sure that we do have a product. And again, I'm sure we all have a product, but it's a lot similar to what is happening on sustainability. There is too many claims and too little certification that is third-party guaranteed. And I think, again, as we pointed out on a recent study on decarbonization within the FAO&EBRD, it's very simple to write about amazing properties of a product, but it's not the same. And I mean, to demonstrate against agreed standards, and again, to have standards, we need to have openness from the sector. I see that Stuart is answering in the chat to the various questions that he received, so I will not get back to you. Michigan State. I think Adeline just posted a very interesting, Adeline Cohen, it's on the chat. We can all look at the link. I think we do have a question from Professor Orsini. As investors, would you rather fund a more secure crop? For example, lettuce cultivation at costs similar to those of organic vegetables in ready-to-eat markets, or a company that explores crop diversification, for example, strawberries for potential higher income, but less established in existing technologies? Very broad question, please. I think this question is better fit for Lambert and Andrews. Lambert, if you want to start.
Yeah, I start again with another notification. As an investor, I would look maybe at more risk, and I have a certain risk appetite. As a banker, I have usually a lower risk appetite. So it depends on which kind of person or which kind of business model you really want to explore. And we, as a Rabobank, we have an investment department, but that's really with Chinese walls separated from our banking department. So what's really the case? So if you said, well, lettuce has already, let's say, a kind of proven track record and a proven cash flow, then that could be a solution, or that could be done by a banking department. If we go to strawberries, or maybe even blueberries or raspberries or blackcurrant, or even flowers in vertical farming or whatever, I think that's still more in the startup scale-up phase, and there you need more equity.
Andrews?
It's a good question indeed. As a bank, I would care less, I think, whether it's running a diversified type crop farm or a one crop. I think it's more of a whichever is more positive unit of economics that is more relevant for the company. But there's also the end market where they're selling. Is if you produce one produce, maybe you have an offtake agreement with a retail chain where you can sell. If you produce many diversified type crops in your vertical farm, then maybe you need to find a market for each of them to sell it, and maybe there is no an offtake agreement. So, you have to guess balance, but I don't think, we would look at how they grow and what they grow. Is more the sort of risk-benefit analysis that a bank would approach this topic on.
Excellent, many thanks. Just before we wrap up, because we are 10 minutes from the end of the e-dialogue, let me ask the panelists, but mostly the companies and whoever wants to respond, possibly in the chat, because we will not have time to give the floor to most. Now, we have interviewed like a large number of companies, tech providers, institutions, banks, investment funds, higher HR companies, a lot of things. Now, what is most visible is that, in addition to the investment that is needed to start, high-tech, urban or peri-urban businesses, what is really killing, and nowadays mostly, is the operational cost. And these are by large due to electricity cost. And while discussing with companies, a comment that came up very, very often is, why is always the entrepreneur that needs to fix the lack of vision of institutions that did not plan accordingly and that did not invest accordingly in infrastructures to allow us to do not only a profitable business but also a green business. And definitely energy it's a hot topic, regardless of the specific context, but in general is indeed a hot topic. And now it's resulting in a killing factor for a number of companies in Europe, globally. I see companies going, closing all over the world in the next weeks. Companies that looked very solid and very open. Now, how do you see the role of institutions? Because we talk a lot about the banking perspective, the investment perspective, the tech perspective, the academia perspective, but then the role of those that should create the enabling conditions for this kind of business that, let's remember, may have a much larger impact on our life, that is not just the provision of food, but it's also a different approach to food production. How do you see, first with the panelists and then to colleagues, the role of institutions in these regards? Over to you. If you want to start, Lambert or Andreas or Matteo, please take the floor, or anybody in the...
Yeah. Of course, institutions or governments, of course, play an important role. And usually I would say it is a kind of public-private partnership what you need, because the government, you can't ask from the government to let's say, install a very large public grid for vertical farming or something like that. So there should also be a market for the public grid. That's the same for public investment as for private investment. And the second thing I want to say is, of course, when you know that you are going to use a lot of electricity, you should consider generate your own electricity by wind energy, by solar panels, by e-batteries, e-boilers, whatever is available. And so it is, of course, looking at both sides of the coin. You can, of course, say, well, it's the responsibility of the government, but on the other hand, it's also your own responsibility when you're starting a business. And usually in high-tech greenhouses, there's a co-generator with biomass or with other types of electricity generation. And you're also looking your location at a certain strategic point on the public grid, or you use residual energy with heat pumps or whatever. So energy is is in fact in high-tech horticulture currently really a topic which is part of your business model. And like I said, climate neutral in 2040 is the Dutch approach, and I think in other countries that should be the same, more or less, that you are not available of fossil fuels in 2040.
Thank you, Lambert. Andreas?
Yeah, energy is obviously in vertical farming is an elephant in a room topic. Vertical farms are huge consumers of energy. So I just can echo what Lambert said. One way to address this, companies in building a business plan can develop renewable energy solutions themselves. Another one is that through this, you actually can manage your risk because you have fixed your energy costs. And in today's energy environment that we see, at least in Europe, that's a threat to your business if you buy energy on your spot prices, because your costs can very quickly balloon to an unsustainable level. So it's all, you need to balance a business. And in terms of, institutional government support, I've seen companies, talking to companies, they complain the fact that, primary agriculture in open field, they benefit from subsidies, whereas, we as indoor growers, we do not receive that. So we, have a disadvantage over farming. So, perhaps, on a policy level, there's something would need to be looked at and helped for vertical farms to scale up and grow. But yeah, so this is my view.
Thank you. Just Matteo, very briefly to you.
Yeah, very quickly. I'm also a supporter of public-private initiatives and agreements. I think it is very important also for taking responsibility also at the entrepreneurial level. I think that any business model that we are going to conceive or to develop need to take into account how to save energy and how to produce energy. These are two pillars given everything that we have told. And repeating myself, I think that measuring is extremely important. There is an issue of transparency that was raised also by Lambert at the beginning. So we need to be transparent and to share data, because if we want to measure, we need to share data and to have data that will support our measurement. But the measurement is a key also to better tell our story and to communicate either to the government or to consumers the values of vertical and urban farming systems.
Excellent. Fully agreed. Let me just close with a final comment before wrap up. I fully agree with the three of you, but whatever the industry will have to do on their own will also increase the investment cost of these businesses. And will the money sector be willing to provide the necessary resources? So in a way, it's like the usual too short blanket, and we have to deal with it. And I think that's part of the business, no? As we say. Let me, unless we have some very last minute comment, let me look back at my notes and wrap up this session. Again, thank you very much first to our panelists. A very big virtual applause for their support time. Of course, they're all very busy. And thank you to all the participants that are equally busy and are here and stayed with us most of the meeting. Now, I think the main message that I gather here is that let's talk about money, but first let's see what do we have on the table. And to do this, we need transparency, we need data, we need clear information, but we also need to value different what we are selling, in the sense that communication should be reliable, and follow what is really the product that we are placing in the market. So the sector could benefit from greater information. Of course, the better and stronger, correct me, Lambert and Andrews, is the preparation of my business model and the understanding of all the variables, of course, energy, the better and the stronger it will be. And again, let me see. Yes, and then the very important aspect raised by Matteo about the ESG attached value of our investments. But again, we cannot value these investments if we do not have transparency and openness in what we do, which does not mean that our technology and the details of our technology need to be disclosed, but all the other information need to be available to allow standardization and therefore applicability and growth of the sector, but also to allow the financial institutions to trust the investments or banking solutions they are offering to the sector. Lambert, Andrews, Matteo, one last really like 30-second message to close, and then I would say goodbye to everybody. Lambert, please.
Yeah, making a business plan, look at your market and look at hybrid solutions. That would be my closing message.
Excellent. We like very much the hybrid idea. Andrews.
For companies in our countries in operation, I would suggest to approach us early, start discussing with us your business plan so we get to know you. Even, at this stage you are too early for us, we can stay engaged and help you at a later stage when you reach a maturity and we think that there is a scope for institutional funding to you.
Excellent. Matteo?
I would say that financial feasibility is crucial, but we need to embed within financial feasibility also environmental and social benefits in order to create and to consider sustainability.
Thank you very much. And on my end, two final message. One, it's for institutions. If countries do not invest in research, development, and infrastructures that are conducive to new businesses, and especially when it comes to agriculture, for the use of technology in agriculture, then we will hardly see a strong sector development. And the second one is for all of us from a very logistic point of view. The e-dialogue by tomorrow will be available on the usual YouTube page. Tamara posted at the beginning of the meeting and will now post it again in the chat. All the previous e-dialogues are there available, so feel free to look at the previous e-dialogues. We will have the two last e-dialogues between December and February. The last one, the very last one, and we kept this one as kind of the dessert, is the life cycle assessment. So Matteo, this will be very relevant to you, but especially to those banks that wants to be Paris aligned, because it will disclose very important analysis that we have performed with a number of independent research institutions and experts. And then we will have the final e-dialogue in 2023, beginning of 2023, where we will present the findings of our study report, and we will invite all the previous presenters to participate and to share their final thoughts about this year of work together. Again, thank you very much to everybody. It was another very important session to us, and I hope to everybody. And with that, I wish you all a very nice and pleasant end of the day, and I wish to see you all at the next e-dialogue that we will send the invite and information very soon. Thank you very much, and goodbye to all.